If the idea of going to work on a Monday morning leaves you feeling panicky, this is a real red flag. Those Sunday evening blues are not a good sign. The thing is, if you're constantly anxious about your workplace, it could be more than just stress. It could be that what you're working in is a toxic environment, which is sadly all too common. In this video, I'm going to take you through the 10 signs of a toxic workplace that I see most often when I'm coaching leaders and their teams, the things to look out for and what they mean. My name's Lucy, my channel's called Lucy on Life, and I'm all about helping people be happy at work and happy in life. So let's crack on and have a look at these signs of a toxic workplace. The first one is that all-pervading feeling of dread, a sort of sick feeling in the pit of your stomach. It's quite often the case that you will think there's something wrong with you before you start thinking that there's something wrong with the environment. So this is a really important one to watch out for. Number 2 is micromanagement and too much attention to detail from leadership. This leads to an undermining of trust. It leads to a lack of autonomy, and ultimately it leaves people in teams feeling that they can't put a foot right because everything that they do is questioned. The third sign is when you're afraid to speak up. So there's a lack of psychological safety. There's a feeling that if you say the wrong thing and you don't even really know what that wrong thing is, that could lead to some form of retribution or punishment. Now, that is not a healthy workplace if that's how you're feeling. If you feel voiceless at work, then the workplace culture is silencing more than just you. The fourth sign is exclusionary behaviour and inequity, where certain voices are prioritised, listened to, other voices are marginalised or not listened to. So if that's going on in your workplace, then that's another sign of a toxic environment. This fourth point really undermines inclusion and undermines representation. So if it is that there are people with disabilities, people of colour, older people in a predominantly young workforce, it's always those minority groups who feel unable to speak up, then that really is a terrible sign of a poor culture at work. Everybody should feel supported and safe to say what they think. The fifth sign to look out for is high staff turnover. I've worked with lots of organisations where they don't measure turnover and retention. So it can be that turnover can be as high as maybe 25% in 12 months. You're losing a quarter of your workforce in a 12-month period. And work to address those issues and look out for what's going wrong in that culture and try to address it is a really good investment, not only financially in your workplace and in your company for your bottom line, because recruitment's expensive, but it's also a massive investment in those people. If they're leaving because they're unhappy for some reason, then that's a terrible thing, a terrible waste of life, and something that I would really urge leaders to look out for. The sixth point I want to draw your attention to is a blame culture. So a culture where when things go wrong, there's a scapegoating, there's an urge to find the culprit in some way and pin the blame on somebody, rather than looking at the wider picture and looking at what is the system that's led to a downturn or a dip in profit or a failure of a new product launch or whatever it is. Look out for that desire in leadership to pin blame on people, rather than look at the wider picture, look at the issues that are going on. Sometimes people make mistakes, we're all human, and if there's a desire in leadership to punish mistakes rather than learn from them, then that's a terrible way to lead a team and will lead to people being afraid to come forward with issues that they want to raise, and then those issues may well get worse if they're being brushed under the carpet or ignored. A culture like this will create fear rather than growth. The seventh sign of a toxic culture is a culture in which there are no boundaries, where you may receive emails late at night or over the weekend, or you're expected to respond. Ever felt that sinking feeling when you switch your emails on in the morning, worrying about what's going to happen, worrying about what's going to have happened in your inbox overnight? It shouldn't be like that. That night times and weekends are not for emailing, they're not for work, and they're certainly not for receiving emails that might cause anxiety. It's not appropriate for leaders to expect staff to be on call 24 hours a day and to be made to feel guilty if they say no. The eighth sign of a toxic work culture is when leaders deny that there's something going wrong or that there's a problem with the culture, or they might respond with, if issues are raised, they respond with, well, that's always how we've done things round here, as if we do things like this is some kind of excuse or validation for poor workplace culture. Something I've experienced a lot in my work with organisations is where poor leadership behaviour is allowed to happen, or poor behaviour by a member of staff is not challenged, not corrected, and that is allowed to fester, and that becomes the default because you're allowed to behave badly. No one picks you up on it, so more people think that they can be rude to each other or dismissive of each other's concerns, and that poor culture then carries on growing if it's not checked. So this really is on leaders to set the tone and make sure that they reward good behaviour and pick people up for behaviour that's unacceptable. A ninth sign of a toxic culture is a constant firefighting, constantly lurching from one crisis to another, never feeling like you've got a long-term plan that you're all working towards. And that is a real symbol of where leadership has failed to set a direction of travel, has failed to put a strategy in place, failed to bring the team together to work towards a common goal. And so teams don't know what each other's doing and constantly will trip over each other because the communications team might not know what the marketing team is doing, or the new product development team is not communicating well with the marketing team. So this is another failure of leadership to kind of bring the team together to work well on a common goal, and the result of that is a sort of sense of lurching from one crisis to another. And the 10th and possibly most important sign of a toxic workplace is the terrible impact that this has on well-being within the team and levels of sickness. People can't be expected to give their best work and feel well and thrive in an environment that is toxic. Insomnia, illness, constant exhaustion, all those can be symptoms of a toxic workplace, not something that's wrong with you. So what I want to say is, if you recognise more than one or two of these signs in your workplace, you're not imagining things and you're not weak. These are signs of a toxic systemic problem that is going on at the workplace. These are patterns, and I've seen them many times in organisations that I've worked with. Do any of these signs feel familiar to you? I'd love to hear. Maybe let me know in the comments. I'm really keen that we learn from each other and share our experiences so we can make work life better for all of us. And stay with me for the next video in this series. This is the first of a 3-part series I'm making, focusing on improving toxic workplaces. So this one's been identifying the signs of a toxic workplace, and the next video that I'm going to share in this series will include 5 tips for staying sane in a toxic workplace if there is no option to leave, which for many people is not an option. Sadly, toxic workplaces are all too common, and my whole purpose in in life and with making these videos is to try to make them less common and give people tools and strategies to make their work life happier. If you've learned anything from today's video, do give it a like. Thank you for watching. See you next time.